Before the first cock crowed, the compound was already stirring. Odu, the stepmother, had risen hours before the rest, her silhouette moving through the blue-black shadows of early dawn like a restless spirit. She stirred a small pot of herbs over a low flame, humming under her breath. Not a lullaby, not a prayer, but something older, more guttural, something that seemed to wake the dust off the walls and coax the night to linger a little longer. On the mat near the cooking shed lay the girl. She was called Amara, though no one used the name unless they were scolding her. She lay curled tight on her side, fists near her chest, face pressed into the worn fabric of her sleeping cloth. She had not truly slept. Not since the third ritual. Not since the red thread began leaving marks that didn't fade. Up, Odu said, appearing suddenly above her. The pot was gone, replaced now by a bundle of cloth, tightly wrapped and tied with a string that glistened in the weak moonlight. Amara didn't move at first. Up, Odu hissed again, grabbing the girl by the ankle and dragging her toward the clearing. Her body thumped across the dirt, skirts bunching under her knees. She said nothing. Screaming had proven useless. Resistance earned her extra strikes, and silence at least bought her time. By the time they reached the edge of the compound, the other wives and children had begun peeking from windows and cracks in doors. No one ever helped. The first few times, some had watched openly, whispering to one another as the girl knelt, as the snake bundle was unwrapped. Now they watched less, listened more. Amara suspected the sound of the ritual had grown heavier, like a weight pressing down on all of them. Odu knelt. She unwrapped the cloth with reverence, slowly. Inside it lay the corpse of a long, slender snake. It had been dried and stretched, lacquered in something foul and shiny, so its skin still shimmered like it was alive. Around its middle was wound a string of red thread, rough, old, tight enough to cut into the brittle scales. "This is the mother snake," Odu whispered almost lovingly. "She eats curses and spits out obedience." Amara had heard this before. Every morning without fail. "You were born cursed. Your mother's womb was soaked in spite. This is why you cry at night. This is why food spoils when you touch it. This is why no one will marry you. But we love you still. So we beat the curse out." The snake was lifted and struck against her back. What? Twice. Amara jolted forward. Her teeth clenched. Her breath caught. She would not scream this time. She had made a promise to herself under the sleeping mat, tracing lines on her skin where the bruises had faded. No screaming. No tears. Not this time. Odu struck again, harder. The snake made a sound like paper being torn underwater, dry, thick, final. The red thread left a trace of crimson on Amara's shoulder. "You should be grateful," Odu spat. "Others are left to rot. We are saving you." At some point, Amara began to count the strikes. It helped. It made the pain mathematical, controlled. After the 12th strike, the world around her began to change. The dawn light had finally touched the tops of the baobab trees. Birds had begun to chirp, but not in song, short, stunted sounds as if unsure they should still be there. The earth beneath Amara felt warmer now. Not from the sun, it was something else. A throbbing. A hum. The snake lifted for the 13th strike. But something snapped. Not in the snake. Not in Odu's wrist. In the ground. A tremor. Small, brief, like a heartbeat from under the soil. Odu paused, frowning, looking down. Then she struck again. 14. Amara's vision blurred. But in the moment the blow landed, she saw something flicker behind her lids. A shape. Quote. Watching. Waiting. After 20 strikes, the ritual ended. Amara collapsed forward, forehead touching dirt. Odu stood over her, breathing heavy but calm, like someone who had just finished sweeping a floor. The snake was rewrapped with gentle hands. "You're better now," Odu said. "You'll speak Kinder today." Amara said nothing. Later, after the sun had fully risen and the compound bustled with activity, women drawing water, children chasing chickens, elders arguing about palm wine, Amara crouched near the cooking hut, rinsing a small basin of cracked okra. Her back burned with each movement. But it was a different burn today. It pulsed in rhythm with the earth. Like something alive had taken root just under her shoulder blades. She dipped her hand in the water and lifted it to her lips, not to drink, just to cool herself. And then she saw it. A scale. Tiny, green-black, caught between her fingers. Not hers. Not from any snake she'd touched before. Her breath caught. Behind her, someone laughed, sharp and sudden. One of the other wives. They always laughed when she flinched. But today she turned to look. The woman was not laughing anymore. Her hand was pressed to her mouth. Her eyes wide. A buzzing sound rose from somewhere behind the chicken coops. Amara turned back to the basin. The scale was gone. She did not tell anyone. That night, she lay awake not from pain that had become familiar, but from a tingling under her tongue. Like something wanted to crawl out. Something that knew how to hiss. In the deepest part of the night, the fire pit crackled softly outside the compound. Most had gone to sleep. Amara rose quietly and stepped out. At the edge of the compound, near the same patch of soil where Odiu had struck her that morning, something glowed faintly in the dark. She moved closer. It was a coil of red thread. It writhed slightly, just enough to let her know it wasn't wind. Beneath it lay the snake's skin, shed and glistening. Amara didn't touch it. She knelt beside it, pressed her hands into the dirt, and whispered the words she'd heard Odiu chant 100 times. But this time her voice didn't sound like hers. It sounded older. And beneath her breath, something answered, a tongue flickering through soil and ash. The village of Ikari had no fences. It did not need them. What protected it was older than wood or stone, a shared belief passed from mouth to mouth, sharpened with time. We are safe so long as we know what to fear. And they feared her. The girl with the clouded eyes and quiet mouth. The one who never answered when spoken to, who never asked for more, who never once cried in public. Her silence was louder than any scream, and that was the problem. Her name was Amara, but they called her by other things. Cursed child. Snake-born. Ashmal. They said she had no real mother. That the woman who died bringing her forth had wept blood instead of water, and the blood turned the ground sour. Her father never spoke of it. He had left the compound the same year Amara turned 5, vanished into the oil roads and never sent word. Some said he joined a church. Others whispered he'd gone mad trying to find a priest powerful enough to untangle what had been knotted into his daughter's spirit. She was passed from house to house after that. Every relative said the same thing, just until she learns obedience. But she never lasted long. The first household took her in during the harmattan season. By the second week, their yam barn burned down, and 2 goats miscarried in one night. They found the girl standing by the ashes in the morning, staring into the embers. She wasn't crying. Just breathing slow and steady like someone watching something only she could see. She doesn't blink, said the housewife. The second home she was sent to, her mother's cousin's family, lived near the river. A fine house, proud, full of talk and children and laughter. Within a month of Amara's arrival, a drought struck the land, turning the river into a narrow stream of black water. The oldest son fell into a trance and refused to eat. When a traveling healer asked who was the newest soul under the roof, all eyes turned to her. The healer took one look and said, "This one has eaten death before tasting milk." They sent her back in silence. The third home was her stepmother's. Odiu never claimed to love her. But she kept her, fed her, gave her work. When the compound chickens began laying bloodied eggs and the cassava tubers turned bitter in the ground, Odiu didn't send her away. She began the ritual instead. The dried snake. The red thread. The early morning beatings to drive out what crawled in. It was a mercy, she said. Amara never argued. But the village watched. They always did. She walks too softly, they'd murmur. She stands where things fall. Even her hair coils like a serpent. Elders gathered beneath the ancient tree near the market and told tales to explain her. Some said she was born under a wandering star, the kind that never stays in one part of the sky. Others claimed her mother was a twin who refused to die properly, and the girl had inherited that unfinished soul. A few even remembered dreams from years ago where a child crawled from the mouth of a snake, covered in clay and whispering names no one knew. They said Amara had no tears because tears could wash a curse away. But mostly they said nothing to her face. They just watched her walk by and touched the beads at their necks or spat into their palms and wiped it on their chest. It didn't matter that she spoke kindly to the younger children. Or that she swept every compound she stayed in before dawn. Or that she never once raised her voice. Her silence made them uneasy. "She listens too much," someone once muttered. And when you ask her what she's thinking, she just stares. That's not a child. That's a pot of still water. And still water hides snakes. At the annual moon festival, she stood at the edge of the dancing crowd, a small calabash of millet in her hands. She didn't join. Her body swayed slightly with the music, but her eyes stayed fixed on the flame at the center of the square. A young girl ran past her, slipped, and fell hard against the stone. The girl screamed. And everyone turned, not to the injured child but to Amara. They waited for her to move, to help, to show surprise. She did none of those. She simply looked, calm as a bowl, and said, "She will not die." The girl's mother slapped Amara across the face. The wound needed 5 stitches. The girl recovered. But the story became something else by morning. They say she pushed her. They say she cursed her before the festival. They say she fed a black worm to the fire last week. It wasn't what Amara did that made them fear her. It was what they imagined she was capable of doing. What kind of child never laughs? What kind of girl hums in her sleep, but only when it rains? Even the priest began keeping distance. He claimed she did not cross herself properly during blessings. When she tried, he said her fingers twisted in the wrong direction. Her stepmother had to pull her away from the altar once, afraid she'd ruin the whole harvest prayer. There was only one moment in the day where Amara let her thoughts rise above the murmur of fear, and that was just before dawn, when the stars were fading but the sun had not yet broken the sky. In that quiet, after the ritual, after the red thread had left its bruises, she sat alone by the water basin and traced circles on the earth with her thumb. She never spoke aloud. But if you leaned close enough, which no one ever did, you might hear her whispering not to herself, but to the thing that lived beneath the ground. "Not today," she'd say softly. "Let them sleep." "Not yet," she'd whisper. "I am still watching." One morning, a boy named Chijiok, bold, foolish, full of questions, followed her to the edge of the compound. He'd heard rumors she grew scales at night, that she fed lizards from her fingers, that her back shone like stone when the moonlight struck it. He waited until she crouched beside the basin, then crept behind the woodpile to watch. He did not scream. He did not run. But when he returned home he would not speak for 3 days. On the 4th he pointed at his chest and cried until he vomited. When the village tried to ask what happened, he scribbled one word in the dust with shaking hands. Eyes. From then on they stopped asking what Amara had done. They only asked what else she could do. And they watched her harder. She never ran away. Never hid. Never denied anything. She simply kept sweeping, kept cooking, kept bowing her head when spoken to. But sometimes, just sometimes, she looked up too slowly or smiled when no one else was smiling, or turned her head when no one had called her name. And each time she did, someone whispered, "That's why. That's what she did to deserve it." The snake never felt the same twice. One morning it would strike her back like it remembered how to coil. The next, it would barely make a sound against her skin, as though it too was tired of the ritual. But it always came, the same dried serpent corpse, knotted in the center with red thread and blackened at the head like it had once kissed fire. It reeked of camphor, ashes, and something too old to name. She never touched it, not even when it rolled off her shoulder onto the ground. Touching the snake was forbidden, unless you were the one holding it. Each morning, a different woman from the village arrived at the edge of the compound, just before the sun reached the treetops. The girl learned to tell them apart by the sound of their sandals on the earth. One shuffled like her knees hurt. Another dragged one foot like it was tethered to something she couldn't shake. A few walked like they were late to something else. A market, a prayer, a life they still believed belonged to them. The women did not speak to her. They only handed the snake to her stepmother and stood by while the ritual began. Some crossed themselves. Some muttered prayers. A few laughed, tossing their heads back like this was theater, not punishment. One woman once came with her own child strapped to her back. When the girl screamed beneath the first blow, the baby whimpered too. But the mother didn't stop watching. The girl began to remember them not by name but by rhythm. The one with the gold bangles always hit fast, 6, 7, 8 strikes before the girl could draw a breath. Her hands trembled, not with guilt but with eagerness. The one with the crooked scarf delivered her strikes in 3s. Soft, soft, hard. As if the last blow had to make up for the others. Then there was the one who cried, silent tears that streaked through her powder, clinging to her jawline like shame. She'd pass the snake over slowly, her hands shaking, and look away. But she always came back when it was her turn again. Some tried to justify it. The girl overheard one woman whisper, "It's not us, it's the curse. We're saving her soul." Another muttered, "If we don't do it, the fire may come back." Fire. Always fire. As if the girl's body held embers no one else could see. They never looked her in the eyes. She did not cry after the first week. She did not scream after the second. Her back became a canvas of fading bruises and healing welts. And still the snake came, passed from woman to woman, like an heirloom of guilt. Sometimes as she lay on the ground afterward, her face pressed to the dust, she would close her eyes and see the women's faces. But not how they were in the morning, not upright, not watching, not blank. She saw them in other ways. The Bengal woman stumbling with her arms full of yams, then dropping them when they turned to ash. The scarf woman watching a goat collapse in her yard, its eyes milky and its mouth buzzing with flies. The weeping woman waking at night to find her roof soaked with something black and warm that wasn't rain. The girl did not know if she was seeing what would come, or what already had. But she never forgot a single face. And in her dreams, when the snake struck her, she sometimes reached out and caught it mid-air. Just once. The dream always ended there. Only once did someone refuse. An old woman with a crooked spine stood at the compound gate, holding the snake by its neck. Her knuckles were white. When her stepmother reached for it, the woman stepped back. She did not speak. She only turned and walked away, still holding the snake. The next day, a new woman brought it instead. No one mentioned the one who walked away. But from then on, the blows felt harder. Angrier. As though her silence had grown teeth. The first strike landed as usual. But something was wrong. The sound was hollow, almost like hitting wood. The girl didn't flinch. Her stepmother hesitated, blinked, and struck again, harder this time. The snake-wrapped rod cracked against the girl's shoulder, but still she didn't cry out. She remained on her knees, arms limp at her sides, head bowed like always. The woman watching that morning, one with a faded scar over her lip, frowned. She leaned forward, squinting. The third strike came, a heavy swing aimed at the base of the girl's spine. It should have left a welt. It should have drawn at least a gasp. But there was nothing. The girl sat perfectly still. Her stepmother dropped the snake to the ground and stepped back, confused. She looked to the witness. "Did you see that?" The woman said nothing at first, then slowly nodded. "No blood." The stepmother rushed forward and yanked up the girl's tunic. No mark. Not a scratch. Not even a red line. Just smooth, cool skin, dull like old ivory, unbothered. Again, the witness whispered. "Try again." So she did. Once. Twice. A dozen times. Each blow landed with a sound, but not a consequence. The girl neither moved nor winced. The snake left no trace. When they were done, the girl calmly stood up, dusted her knees, and walked back toward the compound as if nothing had happened. That day the village hummed with whispers. She didn't bleed. She's finally accepted the blessing. The snake's spirit has entered her. She's cured. She's become. No one dared speak the last part aloud, but everyone thought it. Whatever was inside her had won. The curse had stopped hiding. It now wore her like a cloak. Some said they saw her eyes shimmer like glass in the sun. Others swore that no bird sang when she passed the mango trees anymore. The well near her hut dried up that evening, not slowly but all at once, as if the earth itself recoiled. The girl said nothing. But she felt it. She felt the change in the marrow of her bones, a silence deeper than sleep. It wasn't peace. It wasn't surrender. It was something older. Something cold. It curled inside her chest like a snake uncoiling from decades of waiting. She couldn't describe it, but it made her skin feel tighter. Her breath quieter. Her steps more exact. Even her thoughts began to echo less, as though her mind were turning into stone hallways without windows. That night she didn't sleep. She lay on her mat, staring at the roof, listening to the silence around her. It wasn't normal silence, not the usual mix of crickets, wind, and restless dogs. This silence felt heavy, like the whole night was holding its breath. The girl blinked once and thought, something is watching me. But she was alone. She rose before dawn and waited at the edge of the compound. Her stepmother came with the snake and a new witness. A young woman this time, wide-eyed and pregnant. She held her belly like a shield. When the stepmother raised the snake and brought it down, nothing happened. No bruise. No twitch. No sound. The young woman gasped. "She's not human," she whispered. The girl looked up at her. Slowly. The way mist rises off a river. And the witness stumbled backward, nearly dropping her shawl. She stopped coming after that. More women were sent. More strikes were delivered. The girl stopped kneeling. She would stand, arms at her sides, eyes low, lips pressed into a soft line. The strikes bounced off her like rain off clay. Once the snake snapped in two. The head rolled into the dust. Everyone gasped. The stepmother looked horrified. The girl said, "It's dead already." It was the first thing she had said aloud in weeks. The words made the leaves on the trees shiver. The air cooled, though the sun was rising. From then on, she was not taken to the edge of the compound anymore. The beating stopped. The stepmother took to praying in corners, scattering crushed charcoal and bitter leaf water around the girl's sleeping area. But nothing changed. The girl's body felt stronger. But also, stranger. The coldness in her chest never faded. It became her rhythm, her breath. She began noticing things. The way ants never crossed her path. The way flies buzzed away from her food. The way the dog that once snarled at her now lay outside her door without sound, eyes wide open like it dared not sleep. One day she dipped a gourd into the stream but the water refused to rise. It clung to the stone bed, trembling. When she touched it with her hand, it rushed up and soaked her skin like it had missed her. She dropped the gourd and ran. That night she sat outside the compound and stared at the moon. It seemed dimmer than usual, like it too was unsure of what she had become. When the wind passed, it didn't lift her hair. It curved around her like a respectful bow. The coldness in her chest pulsed once, a slow, deep throb like a drum in a cave. She thought of the snake. Was it ever truly dead? Was it a symbol? A spell? A vessel? Or had it merely been waiting all this time to find a new skin? She touched her shoulder, expecting to feel a scar. Nothing. Her body was whole. Whole and untouched. Like it had shed the memory of pain. The villagers still spoke. She heard them. She must be blessed now. No curse could survive that ritual so long. She's clean. Maybe even holy. Or maybe she's empty. The girl did not care. She felt no hatred. No desire for revenge. What was inside her now had no room for those things. It coiled inside her, patient and sure, knowing its time would come. Not today. Not tomorrow. But soon. Soon they would call for her again. Not to beat her. Not to punish her. But to beg. She lay back on the earth and closed her eyes. She dreamed of fire. But in the dream she did not burn. She watched the flames dance and they bowed to her. A great snake rose from the smoke, larger than any tree, and spoke without words. "Are you ready?" She didn't answer. The snake smiled. And vanished. She woke before dawn, her breath cool, her eyes wide, her hands open to the sky. When the rooster crowed, it sounded hoarse. The goats would not rise. A baby cried in the distance and was quickly hushed. She walked to the stream again. This time, the water rose to meet her halfway. The morning broke as it always did, without mercy. The cock crowed 3 times, and with the third cry, the girl's mat was yanked from beneath her like the earth refusing to cradle her another second. She hit the floor with a small grunt, her hands instinctively moving to shield her ribs before the calloused hands of her stepmother hauled her up by the shoulder. She didn't cry. She never cried anymore. Out in the morning dew, under a sky still struggling to remember its color, she was shoved to her knees. Already the line of women had begun forming, a quiet ritual of cruelty wrapped in routine. The dried snake, blackened and cracked, bound tight in red thread, was passed into the hands of the first woman. That day it was Mamandidi. The girl remembered her well. Mamandidi's strikes were always fast and clipped, as though she were too busy to hate her properly but too devout to disobey the custom. She hit like she was swatting flies, but each blow still burned. The girl felt the snake corpse slap across her shoulders, her arms, the back of her neck. The red thread tore a shallow line across her wrist. No one spoke. But someone watched. By the third strike, a boy no older than 5 had appeared behind the lean-to where his mother cooked cassava cakes. His round eyes peeked through the bamboo slats, and his thumb hovered near his mouth until he realized he was too old to suck it. His name was Tabena, and he had never missed a sunrise. But today he had wandered toward the edge of the compound because of the sound, not the sound of the strikes but the silence after them. He had never seen the girl up close before. Only heard the whispers, about her mother dying while birthing her, about the wells running dry when she fetched water, about the baby that had died after she passed near its hut. Adults didn't say much around children, but they said enough. He had pieced it together. They thought she was cursed. But what Tabena saw didn't look cursed. She looked tired. And small. And not all that older than his sister. And when Mamandidi hit her, she didn't flinch, not even once. That was the part that made something twist in his chest. Not the hitting. The not flinching. After Mamandidi handed the snake to the next woman and walked away, Tabena did something no one else ever had. He left his hiding place. He ran to his mother, who was slicing yam into a pot, and tugged her wrapper. "Mama," he whispered. "Why do they hit her?" His mother spun around so fast the wooden spoon flew from her hand. Her face darkened like thunderclouds over red soil. "Don't ask such things," she snapped. "It's not your place." But, before he could finish, the slap came. Not hard enough to bruise but hard enough to hush. "Don't ever let me hear you speak of her again," his mother said. "Go. Play." That night, after the girl had returned to the corner of the compound where she slept, not quite in any hut, not quite outside, she felt a presence approach. Quiet feet. Soft breathing. She didn't move. Then a small bundle touched her side. carefully wrapped in banana leaf and cloth. She looked up. Tabena stood there not speaking. He looked at the ground, then at her, then back at the ground again. His tiny hands balled into fists at his sides. "I don't want them to hit you," he whispered. Then he ran. The girl didn't unwrap the bundle immediately. She waited until the moon was high and the crickets loud. She peeled it back slowly, a boiled yam still warm. She stared at it for a long time. Her stomach growled, but she didn't lift it to her mouth. Instead, she dug a hole under her mat with her bare fingers and placed the yam inside, covered it with dirt and pressed it down flat. The next day when they dragged her out, she kept her eyes low, but her heart was burning like coal. She watched each woman. This time it was Mama Ebra, the one with the stiff shoulder and stiff faith. Her blows came from the elbow, not the heart, and each one echoed like a stamp of judgment. Tabena wasn't there. But she didn't forget. Later that week, the boy returned again, this time with roasted groundnuts and a shard of palm sugar wrapped in old cloth. He didn't say anything. He just left it at her feet like an offering. She buried it too. Each gift became a seed in the soil beneath her mat. A secret garden of pity and protest. No one else noticed. But the girl began to change. She no longer looked down when the snake struck her. She looked at the hand holding it. Not with anger. Not with defiance. Just looked. And sometimes the hand shook. Tabena kept coming. He brought her things he liked. Dried mango peel, leftover akara, a baby goat's tooth he found near the river. Once he left a shell shaped like a heart. The girl didn't bury that one. She kept it in her palm all night, pressing it so hard it left an imprint. She didn't speak to him. She had learned not to speak. Her silence had become her shield, her knife, her ritual. But she did begin to hum sometimes. Soft sounds under her breath. Low and tuneless. Almost like the buzzing that filled the air when the flies came. Only gentler. One morning after the beating, a woman whispered, "Her eyes look different." Another murmured, "It's the blessing." But the girl knew it wasn't. It was the yam beneath her mat. It was the boy who asked why. The small kindness had done something the beatings never could. It had made her dangerous. Not with rage. Not with revenge. But with something older, more frightening. Hope. Hope that she was not what they said she was. Hope that she could be seen by someone not with fear, but with care. The villagers never saw Tabena with her. He never approached while they watched. But rumors began anyway. Children always know before adults do. They whispered that the cursed girl was smiling in her sleep. That the flies had stopped landing on her arms. That sometimes in the early morning she laughed, just once, quietly as though remembering something. They didn't know it was the sound of a child's footsteps running away after doing something kind. The girl waited. She didn't rush anything. She let the mat soak in the scent of offerings. Let her ribs harden like tree bark. Let the women believe she had accepted the snake as her fate. But beneath the mat, in the dark soil of her corner, something was growing. And in the silence between beatings, something was waking. Not a curse. Not a demon. Not even vengeance. But a name. A name she would one day speak, and not with a whisper. The boy had given her that too. And when the time came she would feed the name to the earth. And it would answer. She slept on a fraying mat beside the cracked wall, the air heavy with dust and dried sweat. The bruises on her back ached with a deep hum, as if her body was remembering every strike of the snake-threaded whip. But tonight her sleep was thick, like it had weight, like it was holding her down. In the dream the snake wasn't dead anymore. It was alive. Not just moving, not just twitching like something half-dead and cursed, but alive. It slithered in slow coils through the open window, its skin glinting black and silver like it had been polished with moonlight. It dropped to the floor silently and then rose, yes, rose, not slid, until it stood before her like a figure eye level, its narrow head tilting like it recognized her. Its tongue flickered once, tasting the air, and then it spoke, not in words, but in a silence that pressed against her thoughts. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She didn't even sit up. She just watched, heart still but not calm. Then the snake moved toward her. She should have felt fear. But all she felt was warmth. Not the warmth of kindness, no. That was something she hadn't known in years, but the warmth of knowing. The warmth of something that had chosen her. It coiled gently around her shoulders. Its scales were warm, not dry or slimy as she had always feared. It lay there like a shawl, like a cloak, like a burden turned into armor. She closed her eyes and for the first time in her life she felt covered. When she woke her back still ached. Her limbs were sore. But the cold on her skin had shifted. There was warmth in her hands. She sat up slowly and reached for the snake. It was lying beside her mat as it always did, the same corpse, the same coiled body, the same red thread around its broken neck. But something was different. She picked it up. The weight was the same. But when her fingers wrapped around its midsection, she felt heat. Real heat. The thread burned slightly against her skin, but not with pain, more like a warning or a signal. She turned the body over and stared at it. Its eyes had always been clouded, white like old pearls. Now they were clear. Ember. Bright. Watching. Her breath caught. She blinked. No movement. No twitch. Still she didn't flinch. Later, when the sun rose pale and unforgiving, the stepmother came as usual, dragging her out by the arm. The women gathered. The usual laughter. The muttering of old prayers. The girl knelt on the earth, face low, arms limp. When the snake was placed in her hand, she did not tremble. Her stepmother said the ritual words, and the crowd made its half-hearted chorus of blessing. The girl raised the snake, still coiled tightly in her palm, and waited. The first strike landed hard across her shoulder. But her body didn't jerk. Her face didn't twist. She smiled. A small one. Just at the corner of her mouth. The next woman came forward. Another strike. Another smile. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't pride. It was something quieter, darker. The kind of smile someone makes when they know a secret you don't. A smile that asks, "Are you sure this isn't feeding me?" Afterwards, the girl walked back to her mat with the snake still in her hand. She didn't let them take it this time. She didn't need to hide it under the rock or wait for the next woman to deliver it. In her corner of the house, the snake's body pulsed slightly, just once, as if breathing. She set it beside her mat, whispering words no one taught her. Not a prayer. Not a curse. Just thanks. That night, when she slept, the snake returned in the dream. But this time it didn't come to coil around her shoulders. This time it curled over her chest and whispered, with teeth that didn't need to move. Next time, strike back. And she knew exactly what it meant. The rain should have come weeks ago. In the old stories, the rainy season arrived with drums in the sky and winds that sang through the mango trees. Women would rush to bring in their cassava, children would dance barefoot in the mud, and the river would rise like a song long forgotten. But now the ground cracked open, begging for mercy. The wind brought only dust. Even the birds stopped calling in the afternoons. The drought had returned, but this time it felt different. Not just long but pointed. Like a finger aimed. Like a warning no one wanted to say aloud. And still, every morning the girl was dragged out of the hut like a rag with limbs. Her arms had grown thin, her skin tight over bone, her eyes shadowed from too many nights staring at the ceiling, listening for the snake's whisper. But her back? Her back had stopped feeling pain. Not because it wasn't there, no, the pain was sharp, hot, fresh each time, but because it no longer entered her. The blows landed and her body stayed still. She had become too quiet, they said. Too still. Too knowing. The women who once laughed nervously now hesitated before touching the snake. They looked at the girl like they were afraid she was looking back from somewhere else. Somewhere deep. It was the third week without a drop of rain when the stepmother first dipped the snake into hot water. The pot had been left over the fire since dawn, its steam curling like breath. She took the snake, still stiff and stinking with old curses, and pushed it in until the red thread floated up like a ghost rising. When she lifted it out, steam poured from its skin. She let it drip for only a second before slapping it across the girl's back. This time the hiss came from the snake, not her. Or so it sounded. But still the girl didn't cry. Not even a twitch. Not even a whisper. Just silence, and that same look in her eye like the beating was passing through her, as if her skin had turned to smoke. The elders gathered. They stood at the edge of the compound in their red cloths and heavy beads, chewing on silence as if it were a bitter leaf. One of them, a very old man with blind eyes, spat on the ground and muttered, "She's holding back." The others murmured in agreement. "She's the reason. The rains wait for her spirit to bend. She mocks the gods. She needs to be broken." When they called her forward that night, she didn't resist. She rose from her mat, walked through the line of oil lamps without flinching. Even the wind seemed to move away from her path. The compound was darker than usual. No moon, no stars, just the hush of watchers afraid of what they might see. "She must release her spirit," one elder said. "She is tightening her womb against the land," said another. "She must cry," a woman said softly. "The land needs her tears." So they beat her again. Not just the stepmother this time, but all of them. Each person took the snake, dipped it in hot water, and struck her. One by one. Some with hesitation, others with fury. But the girl, she didn't bend. Not even a sound. Not even a flinch. They broke 2 snake corpses that night. The threads snapped, bones cracked. Someone tried to use a broomstick when the second snake split apart, but the elder hissed, "Only the snake must touch her. That is the law." So they waited till morning. Found another snake. Boiled it. Tried again. Still no cry. She did not scream. But the sky did. On the 7th day clouds gathered, not black but gray, swollen like bellies full of hunger. People rushed outside, eyes lifted in hope. Fingers stretched to catch the first drop. But no rain came. Just thunder, low and rolling like someone clearing their throat before speaking. A warning. A promise. Or a threat. The girl sat under the tree by the back of the compound, the newest snake lying beside her like a tired pet. Its eyes had not closed. They stared outward. So did she. By then the whispers had begun. She's not a girl anymore. She's waiting for something. She's feeding on the pain. Can't you see how full she looks? They noticed how her skin no longer cracked. How her feet didn't blister walking barefoot on the sun-heated ground. How animals no longer ran when she came near. Even the goats turned their heads as if in recognition. The village grew desperate. The river shrank to a line of brown sludge. The yam harvest failed. A fire started in the eastern hut and took 2 others with it. Babies fell ill. Women miscarried. Men sat with blank eyes and forgot the names of their fathers. And still no rain. They called the priestess. She arrived at dusk, dressed in blue and white, eyes lined with chalk, lips dark with cola. She stood before the girl and looked into her face. And the girl looked back. Not down. Not away. Directly into her eyes. The priestess stepped back. "She is not cursed," the priestess said. "She is waiting." "For what?" someone asked. The priestess did not answer. But the girl knew. That night, as the compound held its breath, the girl whispered to the snake. She didn't say words, not like prayers, not like curses. Just something in the air between them. A vibration. And the snake pulsed with it. Glowed faintly at the edges, like heat waiting to take form. The sky above gave one long thunder roll. But still no rain. Because it wasn't the sky that needed to break. It was the village. And she was going to wait until it did. The smoke was thick and silent, rising like a finger toward the sky before anyone even saw the flames. It was early, too early for firewood or cooking, and the morning air was still heavy with sleep when someone screamed. The shed was burning. It had stood for years beside the compound wall, a place where old tools, broken calabashes, and the wrapped, shriveled corpse of the punishment snake were kept. No one lived near it. No one lit fires near it. And yet, the roof was already caved in when the first bucket of water was thrown. By the time the flames were quenched, nothing remained but a ring of scorched ground and smoke curling from the ashes. But the snake had not burned. Its body lay exactly where it had always been, wrapped in cloth, the red thread still tight around its mouth. Not a single scale had blackened. Not even the cloth had singed. It was as if the fire had danced around it, licked the floor and walls, eaten the rafters, and bowed its head in respect. The villagers gathered slowly, uncertain whether to speak. The girl stood at the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. She didn't come forward, didn't flinch. The firelight had kissed her face golden. Her eyes were unreadable. "She did this," someone whispered. "No," another said, their voice low with awe. "She survived this." One of the elders stepped forward to examine the remains. He picked up the snake with trembling fingers, turned it over once and held it up for the crowd. "It is whole," he said. "A sign," someone muttered. But of what, no one could say. That day the girl was not beaten. No one called her to the center of the compound. No one handed her the snake. The stepmother stayed inside. The priestess didn't return. Even the children who once laughed now kept their distance, glancing at her with wary silence. The second day passed the same. She sat under the tree again, legs tucked beneath her, the charred air still clinging faintly to her skin. She did not speak, but her presence filled the space like a shadow with heat. Even the insects stayed away. Some said she had been protected by fire spirits. Others said she was the fire. At night the sky finally opened, but only slightly. A mist fell, not enough to wet the ground, just enough to tease it. The leaves drank greedily. The villagers stared upward, hoping for more. But it stopped. By morning the elders had made their decision. They gathered in a circle, red cloths tied tighter than usual, beads clacking as they nodded in grim agreement. The oldest among them rose, leaned on his staff and declared, "The girl has not yet yielded. The fire spared her. That means she is stronger than the punishment." We must go further. There was no suggestion of mercy. Only the understanding that something greater, something older, was watching. And the village could no longer pretend it wasn't afraid. A new punishment would be chosen. And it would not involve the snake. She woke before the rooster crowed, her feet already bare, her eyes already open. There was no call, no drum, no hand dragging her from her mat today. She rose on her own, moved like someone walking inside a dream. No one stopped her as she stepped outside, not even her stepmother, who watched from the doorway with lips pressed thin. The shed was still black, its ashes cold now. But the snake was there, laid atop a stone as though waiting for her. It looked heavier than before, darker too, as if it had absorbed the fire without being consumed. The red thread was still wound around its snout, faded but intact. She picked it up with both hands. It was lighter than she expected. No cloth wrapped it now. No chance accompanied her. She began to walk. At first only a few people noticed. A child fetching water, a man sharpening a blade, an old woman sweeping the dust from her threshold. They looked up and froze. Their mouths parted but no one called out. The sight of her, barefoot, calm, holding the blackened snake to her chest like a bundle of firewood, did something to them. It made the air shift. She passed the first compound. A goat stopped mid-chew. A woman dropped her calabash. She walked past the market where traders were setting up stalls, the scent of pepper and drying fish wafting in the wind. One man stepped aside, gripping the edge of his mat like a shield. Another crossed himself, then crossed again. Still she did not speak. She walked through the center of the village, past the old tree where chickens roost, past the broken well no one used anymore. Even the flies seemed unsure whether to follow her. The snake's skin shimmered in the morning light, its blackness almost blue, almost purple. Children hid behind their mothers' legs. Dogs crouched low and did not bark. The elders saw her too. From their shaded porch, they sat in silence, the youngest among them rising halfway before the oldest grunted and pulled him back down. "Let her pass," he said without speaking. She did. No one dared stop her. The path to the river was narrow and crooked, winding through tall grass and termite hills. A place children were once forbidden to go alone. But she was not afraid. The earth was warm under her feet. The snake pulsed faintly in her grip as if remembering what it once was. The river was waiting. It had receded over the weeks, thin and slow like an old man's breath. The banks were cracked and dry, but the water still moved in the center, sluggish and sullen. She stepped to the edge, the mud welcoming her toes. A single frog croaked once, then fell silent. She knelt, brought the snake to her lips, and whispered something. No one knows what she said. No one heard it. Even the air held its breath. Then, without ceremony, she placed the snake into the river. It floated for a moment, coiling as if alive, then sank beneath the surface without a ripple. The river hissed. Not like steam or wind but like a warning. A breath through teeth. A voice not meant for human ears. She closed her eyes and listened. Behind her, from somewhere in the village, a child began to cry. Some say the water turned dark for a second. Others say it shimmered like oil. A woman swears she saw another snake rise from the surface. Silver, massive, crowned, but no one believed her. What everyone agrees on is this: the drought broke that night. Rain came with violence. Thunder rolled like drums of war. The earth drank until it overflowed. Thatched roofs collapsed under the weight of it. Fields flooded. And still it rained. They searched for the girl the next morning, but she was gone. Some said the river had taken her. Others claimed they saw her walking into the hills with her hair braided in serpents. And from that day on, no one in the village ever touched a snake again. Not dead, not alive, not even in stories. Because sometimes when they looked toward the river at dusk they could hear it hissing. And in that sound there were footsteps. Barefoot. Slow. Coming closer. The rain had come. The river flowed full again, roaring with memory. The soil softened. The air smelled of wet leaf and ash. And the girl, the one they had called cursed, the one they had beaten with a snake, had vanished. But she had not gone. The first morning, it was the butcher's wife who woke screaming. Her husband found her curled like a worm in the corner of their hut, fingernail scratches along her arms, lines that looked too much like lashes. She could not speak for a full hour. When she finally opened her mouth, all she said was, "She came with the sky." No one understood what she meant. The second morning, it was the elder's son. He'd always laughed the loudest when the snake was brought out, once spitting on the girl as she was dragged past. Now he trembled in bed, his back bleeding through the white cloth his mother pressed against it. "I saw her eyes," he whispered. "They were full of river. She smiled and then I couldn't breathe. By the fifth morning no one was sleeping soundly. By the seventh people had stopped asking what was happening. The village had changed, though none would say it aloud. The rain had fed the crops, yes. Maize grew tall again, cassava roots thick and strong, goats bearing fat twins, but the people did not celebrate. There were no dances, no offerings at the market shrine. At night the drums stayed silent. And in the mornings someone else always woke screaming. The girl was never seen. And yet the children whispered, "She walks." They said she moved between shadows before the rooster crowed, barefoot on wet earth, her hands glowing faintly with warmth, like coals wrapped in skin. They said her breath smelled of pepper and rain. That the snake had not died, only changed. That it now lived in her hair, woven between her braids, hissing lullabies into her ears. None of the adults believed it, but none of them walked the paths before dawn anymore. One child claimed to have seen her. A girl named Ada, no older than 7, swore she saw a figure standing beneath the mango tree near the burned shed. She didn't run. She just stared. "She looked at me like she knew my name before I ever had one," Ada said. And then she disappeared just like that. When asked if she was afraid, Ada shook her head. "She didn't come for me." But someone else was marked that morning. A woman who once laughed as she bound the snake's tail with twine had woken to find her feet stained red, her bedsheet slashed down the middle. No one said it was punishment. No one said it wasn't. People began sleeping in groups. Others lit fires that never went out, thinking flame would keep her away. But fire did nothing. A priest was called from the next village. He arrived with charms and bells, his face painted with white powder, robes fluttering like frightened birds. He stood in the center of the square and declared that no spirit could overcome his protection. That night he was found lying in the river, clothes soaked, whispering the same word over and over, "Mercy, mercy." He left before sunrise. Then the dream started. People spoke of a forest they'd never seen, where trees wept and the sky bled. They spoke of a path that twisted in on itself, of a hut made of bones, of a girl's voice singing without sound. Some woke with tongues swollen. Others woke to find small snakes coiled beneath their mats, their eyes open, unblinking. The elders called an emergency gathering. They argued beneath the tree. Some said the girl must be hunted. Others said she was never a girl at all, but a test sent from the gods. One suggested they rebuild the shrine and offer it to her. That night, the mango tree split in half with no lightning, no wind. Just a crack like thunder and it was done. No one mentioned offerings again. And still she came. Not every night. Not even every week. But enough that her presence lingered like mist. Enough that laughter felt risky. Enough that children learned early to hush their voices before dawn. They began to say her name with reverence. Not the name she was born with, no. That name was gone. It had been buried with the shed, with the snake, with the version of her they'd tried to erase. Now she was something else. The one who walks before dawn. She who strikes without touch. The fire in the river's mouth. They never saw her face again. But her legend grew until it eclipsed the sun itself. Visitors came and were warned to be kind. No one raised their voice. No one told cruel stories. Even the chickens were treated gently. Because no one wanted to be the next to wake with fire dancing across their back. In time the beatings were forgotten. The snake was no longer spoken of. But the children still knew. They passed it down in lullabies, in games, in chalk markings on the ground. When they jumped rope they sang, "Step not wrong or she will come," slash fingers burning, beating drum. And always, always, someone kept watch at dawn. Not to stop her. But to be sure she came.